All right, so here is the static picture of the animation. And what happens is if a cell needs material, it will send the receptors out to the surface. If the cell has plenty of cholesterol, fats, and material, it will not send the receptors out. And so if the receptor is not on the surface, the LDL particle will pass, and that's how we can have way too much LDL in our bloodstream, because every cell it encounters has way too much already. Now, how do we normally think about regulating the synthesis? We have talked about a little bit about this before, but remember, insulin is going to enhance the committed step. Glucagon will inhibit the committed step. Cholesterol itself, okay, will come back and do a feedback inhibition. Cholesterol will also, if it is high in the cell, stop the receptor from being on the cell surface, and so it stops endocytosis on the inside of the cell. And cholesterol itself will then start to make esters of the cholesterol for storage. And so cholesterol itself that has the hydroxide can be incorporated in membranes. Once we have the esters, it will not. Now, in the liver, the esters are repackaged on the inside of the particles. When we start making derivatives of cholesterol, we start making a whole different type of molecule that can be useful for digestion and for a whole set of hormones. The first set of derivatives that are produced from cholesterol is really the beginning part of the degradation of cholesterol. And so what we're going to do is we're going to make the cholesterol a lot more soluble. And so we will use an enzyme called cytochrome P450 using molecular oxygen, and we'll add lots and lots of hydroxides. We'll also add a very polar molecule, either glycine or another charged molecule, to the end of the chain. And what we do is we get a molecule that has both polar and nonpolar regions, and they can be used as what are called biosalts, which then can dissolve fatty material in the stomach so that they can be solubilized and digested. The bile is stored in the gallbladder. Cytochrome P450 is an interesting molecule itself. It catalyzes hydrations of simply a methyl group to a hydroxide using molecular oxygen. It also needs NADPH. One thing about the reactions here, it is used for cholesterol. It binds to very hydrophobic molecules. It's intended for cholesterol, but it will hydroxylate any organic molecule that is very hydrophobic and place hydroxides on it. What it is tending to do is trying to make it soluble so that it can be excreted out. One of its targets that cytochrome P450 works on, other than cholesterol, is drugs. Many drugs are hydrophobic based, and so cytochrome P450 is one of the enzymes that will clear a drug. Every time you give a drug, there are some concentrations that you are concerned about and lifetimes. And so to get a therapeutic response, you have to give enough drug that the concentration goes high enough to bind to wherever you want to bind, whether that be an enzyme or whether that be a receptor. And so the dosages you take are based upon your weight and how large you are. Usually they determine that by age. Okay, and so you take 1 pill a day, 2 pills a day, 3 pills a day, or whatever the dosage is that they calculate. The other thing is a half-time or a lifetime that the drug will be active in the system. There are many enzymes that the drugs will, as they go through the bloodstream, react with. Cytochrome P450 is one of them. Most of the time, the drugs that we take now have been identified very, very closely in it binds specifically to the receptor or to the enzyme that we want to function for. But we still have side effects. Many of the drugs that we used to do, we would throw drugs at people and it would bind all sorts of things and cause side effects. Now we can develop drugs that actually bind really, really tightly to the one thing that we want. A lot of side effects come not from the drug itself, but from the derivatives of what actually happens when they're being broken down. Cytochrome P450 is one of those that when you go through drug trials, they will treat the drug to cytochrome P450 to see the outcomes, what are the degradative pieces of that, and then they will test to see if those are those have side effects or are toxic. And so there are a couple other enzymes that they treat the drugs to see what kind of breakdown products there will be. And so cytochrome P450 will detox any foreign substance and sometimes make the detoxed items a little bit more reactive. If we change to the hormones, we are still hydroxylating, and we hydroxylate the 20 and 22nd position to get a dihydroxide, and then we break off the tail, that hydrophobic tail. Pregnenolone is the precursor to all of the steroid-based hormones. And so whatever hormone you have that is steroid-based, it comes from this particular structure, shortened. And all the hormones are derivatives, usually smaller in size than cholesterol and a lot more hydrophobic, a lot more polar entities added to it. And so there are different classes of them. The two most famous are the testosterone and estrogen, which are the two smallest of the hormone classes. When you go back and look at the synthetic pathway, okay, that 5-membered intermediate that was the step away from mevalonate, the isopentenyl pyrophosphate, is very important in the synthetic processes of hydrophobic intermediates. And so we have the quinones, okay, we can synthesize. We can also, we also see that this is used in plants quite often, where we have chlorophyll, rubber, all the vitamins that are derived, vitamin D, the beta carotene, and so a lot of structures that we use are based upon this particular key intermediate. And so if you think about key intermediates in metabolism, there are some that come up and are seen quite often. Pyruvate, biggie. Acetyl-CoA is huge in our bodies in the synthesis of a lot of different things. This one plays a very big role in lots of synthetic pathways. And so this is one of those biggie in terms of structures that are used all over metabolism.